Welcome. My name is Playgue, and we are talking about every single effect on this device. I will say that the filter is definitely the most OP effect on this device. I use over 100 filters in the 50 some odd tracks that I know. That's at least 2 filters per track, and some of them use up to like 5 filters. It's ridiculous. In any case, this is going to be a longer video because we have a lot of things to talk about with the filter, but if you stick to the end, I have a demo track that will talk about more examples of using the filter, as well as practical examples of the filter usage. First thing we want to do is talk about the differences between the MK1 and the MK2. All of the effects tutorials that I make are with both devices in mind, with some minor differences. Most of these videos can be applied to both the MK2 and the MK1. The MK2, in this case, actually separates its filters. So it will say low pass filter, band pass filter, or high pass filter instead of just filter like this device does. Now, what is a filter? With a filter, we are filtering out, or not including, a certain range of frequencies. And that is literally all the filter does. It's pretty straightforward to understand this effect, but there are quite a few parameters, so let's go into those. We have type, we have rate, we have depth, we have resonance, and we have cutoff, and we have step rate. It has the most parameters of any effect on the MK1 at least, and for good reason. There's a lot we can do with the filter. So let's start with the first parameter. The type, which on your MK2, if you're using MK2, is going to be separate effects altogether. We have a low pass filter, a band pass filter, and a high pass filter. A low pass filter cuts out all of the high frequencies. It is pulling those back and only letting the low frequencies through. A high pass filter is doing the opposite. It's cutting out all the low ends and only letting the high ends through. And then a band pass filter, it only lets through certain signals depending on where the band is. And so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit to talk about cutoff for a moment. The cutoff is where the band is actually being placed. So let's start with the low pass filter. Let's play our white noise. Next parameter is going to be rate. The rate, this is your modulator right here. This will move the filter up and down at a given rate. So we'll use a low pass filter. We'll have it at 50. You can also have it at note measurements as well. If you want to stay in sync with your tempo, let's go ahead and use the filter. The rate is best used with note time-based measurements based on your tempo, so that way it stays in sync with the rest of the track. Depth is how deep, with the rate, it will dip itself into the filter. So imagine that there's a bus, and every imagine that there is a pool of water and a bobber in the middle. The rate is at the rate at which that bobber will move up and down. The depth is the depth the bobber will move into the water. A bigger depth, the bigger the waves will be. So it's still moving up and down at the same rate, but it's just moving more and more exaggerated, or less and less as you change the depth. Hope that analogy helps you understand these parameters now. I will have one of my Playgue charts on resonance later. Basically, this is the point at which the frequency is most prominent. and this is controlled by the cutoff. But again, more on this when I talk about the chart. Speaking of cutoff, the next parameter is cutoff. This is where the filter is located. This is where the cutoff point of where you want it to cut off the signal, where the filter is. And this depends on the type. So for a low-pass filter, 0 is about 160 hertz and lower. As you move to 100, it adds in higher frequencies. Basically, the closer you move to 100, the less it is filtered. Bandpass filter, 0 is about 1000 hertz and below, and 100 is about 10,000 hertz and above. This contains a fairly large range, but basically, the number here correlates to the center or peak of what the band range is. High pass filter, the 100 is about 10,000 hertz and above, and as you move it down to 0, it adds in lower frequencies. Basically, the closer you move it to 0, the less it is filtered, opposite of the low pass filter. I want you to note that even though when it's muted, aka like on a low pass filter, if we have it on 100, or a high pass filter if we have that on 0, the filter still cuts some of the sound. In order for it to not do anything, you need to have everything at 0. And the cutoff is controlled by the knob, as you've been seeing. Last is step rate. Like the other step rates and the other effects, this works with the rate to make progressive steps towards a given depth. You can check out any of these tutorials for a more in-depth look at step rate. All right, earlier I alluded to a chart that you can play notes with the filter. Why, yes you can. If you put on a bandpass filter, or a low pass or high pass works too, depending on the note and the sound that you want. But if you put the rate at 0, the depth at 0, and the step rate at 0 or off, the resonance at a certain value, like 80 or above, you don't want any less than that, so we'll do 95, you can make notes. The larger the resonance, the longer the note plays for. To activate the superpower, all you have to do is dry kick, rim shot, or hit the microphone. Rim shot is really good for higher notes. Dry kick is really good for lower notes. And hitting the microphone is best for the lowest notes. But really, you can do any sound you like into the microphone. I will say that the sounds that are in the filter's range work best. So if you're in a lower range and you're in a low pass filter, making like really low bass sounds, doing more low bass sound noise will be able to activate the filter a lot more. Versus if you're doing more high sounds in a high pass filter range, or even a high cutoff, doing higher notes like rim shots and pop clicks are a lot more useful. One thing to note is you definitely need to add EQ or a vocal distortion for the volume, and you may need to have a really high gain on your EQ for you to be able to actually hear what's going on. And here we go. This is my Playgue chart for the cutoffs on how to make certain notes. I'll give you an example that'll probably sound familiar to you. We'll go ahead and look at the chart here. We'll play some notes based on the cutoff value. And there we go. Sound familiar? Another fun fun trick you can do with the filter is make a really high-pitched whiny sound. All you have to do is have your resonance up really, really high, and you just diddle with the cutoff knob. Another very common use for a filter is to make cleaner sounds. This is the secret sauce that a lot of loopers will use to make their sounds sound really clean. You're like, oh my gosh, how do you make such a clean drum kit? Well, this is how. You just filter out the garbage notes. If you want clean kicks, all you have to do is have a filter on, put it on a high-pass filter, put it at 9 o'clock, and that's it. There you go. Now you have clean kicks. If you want clean hi-hats, a couple of dimensions to try is 5 o'clock, which is just maxed out, cut off 100, 4 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. For me personally, I like to use an EQ, and you can check out my EQ tutorial if you want to learn how to do hi-hats that way. But if I actually run out of EQs or I need EQs for other things, I will then resort to using a high-pass filter at one of these values. If you want a really powerful bass, you can do a tongue bass with a high resonance. It will react with the resonance in the filter and produce a really heavy bass line. Another really fun thing to do with a low-pass filter is doing bass wobbles. If you diddle with an input effects knob while doing bass sounds, I find that lip rolls and lip oscillations work the best. You can have two filters at two different cutoffs, and then you could have different bass notes depending on which filter you have activated. Another dubstep bass trick is to have a delay bass on B, and then you put a filter on C, and then you do a wobble with the filter cutoff with the knob with that as well. That's fun. All right. Well, what other bass things can we do with a filter? Well, we can add a sub to our kick. So if we go over to a filter, we set a low-pass filter, set a rate of 0, depth of 0, resonance of 95, and then our cutoff is whatever key our track is in. You just dry kick into the microphone, or you hit the microphone. It'll make a sub under your kick. I will note that the resonance is basically how long you want the tail end of that kick to be. So if you want it to be a little bit shorter, you could have a lower resonance. If you want it to be longer, you can have a higher resonance. Another trick that you can use a filter for is to hide things in a track effects filter after you record them. If you want to hide what you have created, in this example, I will be making a note into the microphone. It's going to be a granular delay note, and it will immediately be filtered the moment that it is finished recording and starts overdubbing. The track effect will immediately be applied to the track, filtering it. So you can hear the filter is already being applied to this. I'll give you another example. Here we have a sound that's going on. If I want to hide what this is about to become as part of the main track, I could have a filter on top of it. When I finally go to max it out, then you're able to experience the filtered sound, and then later on in the track you can bring in for what the sound officially becomes. So now this is being hidden by the filter. When creating Dream live, you want to put on a filter. So then when it goes to overdub and capturing those other notes from the slicer, it will filter those notes that are already recorded. And then once you're done making the second sequence, on the third sequence, you can remove the filter, and then it'll actually sound like it makes sense. Show you one last crazy technique you can use with a filter. If you have a filter of a rate that is 99 and a step rate of 100, you can do some wild stuff going back and forth between 99 and 100. Add a granular delay in there too. Basically, have fun with filter. If you want more information on filters in general, here's a YouTube video that talks about filters. I have linked to many times before, but let's look at a track that utilizes several filters and see how I use them. RC-505 in the party. Playgue is the route with the RC. I keep multiple decks on me. MK1 in the alchemy. My hands faster than a heartbeat. Cause I'm quick with it, cause I'm quiet with it, cause it's sick in it. No shit lyrics, I'm world known, I got no critics. Hey, looping is my biology. I am an oddity, calling oncology. Black incinerator, you better honor me. I'm making moves, your girl coming on to me. You better choose, I'll commit a robbery. Hey, my girl got a boo, I'll get her to cuddle me. I don't give a fuck about that extra technology, I just go, bitch! You better. Hey, yeah, looping in my biology. Hey, yeah, you better. Hey, yeah, you better. Hey, yeah, you better. Hey, yeah, you better. Yeah. You better.
Dude, I'm like blind on this side, so I have like no idea what you're doing next to me. But it's just vibe. I just feel the pure vibes. Oh yeah. Bitch, you better.
Well, you better.